Hello, everyone! Woo! Let's get on with it. So, I'm sorry. No, there's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of things going on. But frankly, I feel as though the veil is being ripped apart and pulled over our eyes. Oh my God! But they finally learned. They finally remembered. They finally figured out that you know who is perhaps on the Epstein list. Oh my God! Is this an episode of Sipping and Sorcery? Who can say? Anyways, before I get ahead of myself, I want to give a huge shout out to again Cat and Cauldron. Why? Because they are fabulous. Because they have always been there with the best information possible, and they know their shit. And I also want to make a quick shout out to all the other practitioners out there that are doing what they can for their communities, that are out there, fighting for our rights and everything else, that are out there doing spells, that are doing the work that is required to help us fight the spiritual war we are now in. Because, you give Christians a mile, they take a country. So that's how it works. That's how it works. Oh my God, it's disgusting. And I'm not here for that. But what I am here for is for the gossip. I know. Do I have some? I do. So, back home, there is a woman by the name of Cynthia. I don't like her. A lot of people do not. But Cynthia has this uncanny ability of talking when no one asked her to. She will not stop talking. And I'm like, Cynthia, you're a dear darling, but honestly, could you rest for a bit? Could you calm down or whatever? And she's like, what on earth do you mean, love? I'm like, don't call me love. In my head, I just say this out loud because I want to go to a fisticuffs with, Cynthia. But we were at the academy one day, and we were, discussing some sort of curriculum we had designed for the class because, I am a teacher, things like that. Although my subject is different. Oh, I have to tell you the dream I had. Oh my God, it was disgusting. Ah! I haven't tried it in real life. I think it might work. I don't know. So we were having a discussion about curriculum in class, and then she's like, well, maybe we could teach them something that's, a bit different. I was like, different? How, Cynthia? It's like, well, in the mortal realm, they have this thing called, I don't even know where she came up with this. And long story short, she was like, honestly, they have this thing I hear called social media. And there's this man that's very prevalent on it. He has a horrible toupee. He has orange skin, but he's just very captivating in what he's saying. And I was like, Cynthia, no! Oh my God. So now she's consumed by it, talks nothing about it. And she's like, I don't know who this Epstein person was, but I mean, having their own island sounds absolutely stupendous. I was like, Cynthia, stop! Oh, she's going to jail. Well, at least someone is. Apparently, no one else is going. They're keeping it a secret. Absolutely called this out. Who the fuck didn't? I said it was on the Epstein files and everything else. Elon Musk tweeted a post about it. But that's all the mundane shit, But back home, like I said, she's up to her antics, and now she's spewing the same sort of garbage we hear nowadays. She's not even from this realm, and she's already being consumed by this disgusting social media. It's absolutely everywhere. But before I get any further, I want to make sure I properly introduce my brilliant, bodacious, and talented co-host, Grimmy! How are you, darling? Oh my God, you're tired of it too. I am tired. Just nuke us already. Woo! I'll just go back home. I don't care. I'll just go back home. Fuck it. There's at least 200 other worlds I can visit. That I don't have to even pay rent for. Oh my God, lovelies. It is a chore to be here. I hate being here. I don't know how you handle this sort of fiasco you call a country, this world, honestly. But you know what? I'm here for the chaos. I'm here for the madness. It is what I'm here for. And I've been watching some people. And speaking of watching people, stalkers, don't stop. Oh my God, I'm always wanting to add a new body to my collection. But no, seriously. Now, for those of you who know out there, and I'm sure you do, there's a lovely brilliant and beautiful person with a channel known as Ivy Corvus. Ivy the Occultist, I love you, darling. You are magnificent. You are brilliant. And I enjoy your conversations, especially with your co-host, Justin. And yes, I have been listening to your podcast. If I won't even see this, but if you do, hello, darling. And hello, Justin. I may have submitted some things before to you, some questions, some criticisms or whatever, but you open up the floodgates, darling. I'm just simply shooting my shot. I'm pouring my water, my 2 cents, because I was like, you know what? I feel as if someone has to be educated because, I'm like, it's one of those things where it's like, no one asked you, but you literally did. You said, put in your 2 cents, give your madness takes. I can be absolutely disgusting as well, but I try to keep it somewhat kosher. So, they had some things about, and this is even the main topic of the video today, but it's a small aside. Justin has some very brilliant takes, and honestly, it's more of a, you know what, fuck it, say whatever you want, and I love that. I adore that sort of frame. However, when we, say certain things from a certain feeling point, I can understand completely. But there's a entire, understanding as to what these things are and why they are the way they are. And, and Justin was very like, you know what, I used to fuck whatever the fuck I want, it's whatever it says. And honestly, and there's power in that, and I love that too. But the problem is that we have people that are growing up nowadays that are getting all this information from Witch Talk, from TikTok, and intention is everything, like those bitches. And I'm like, well, no. And so if you're, like the whole, like for example, they had this other thing about altars. I gave my 2 cents about that. And the other thing was about Hecate. And I'm not a devout follower, but I do honor Hecate, obviously, because she's fantastic. And I was like, the whole thing about the epithet thing and everything else and what it is to me and everything, and why you shouldn't, I think, I forgot what was said exactly, something along the lines of, honestly, what she is totally depends on whatever her names, her epithets, I feel like she's this way. And I'm like, well, I had some apprehensions about it because I was like, well, darling, like, let's say, for example, when it comes to things like the gods, for example, and if you actually want to talk to Hecate, you have to put a descriptor out there. This is a specific person I'm talking about. That's like saying, and I said this too, that's like saying, for example, I'm calling out for Justin, but the Justin that responds is the Christian Justin or the conservative Justin or the anti-gay Justin. But that's not the one I was talking about. But that's why epithets are important. And I sort of specified that in this little, written thing there. If they read it, good. If not, I understand it completely. But, not throwing shade. Honestly, maybe I am. Oh my God, this is exciting. But no. And so, but Ivy was like, she didn't agree with it. She understood it, as do I. But I was like, this is a shit take. I hated that take. I was like, what? So that means that I can call you whatever the fuck I want, and you're supposed to already know who I'm talking to. Like, no. Like, these gods aren't necessarily mind readers. But honestly, at the same time, though, if you are working with an egregore, it's whatever. Or perhaps you're working with the energy of something. Or perhaps, like, let's say, for example, you have a specific archetype or perhaps an image of Hecate in your mind because it's how it speaks to you. But it has the same sort of abilities or the same sort of, functions that normally Hecate would have. Then I suppose, but to conflate both of them together can be sort of maybe a little bit insulting, I'm not sure. Or perhaps, like, I also mentioned that there's things like trickster spirits out there, or malevolent spirits that will pretend to be something that they are not, so that they can gain something from you. And then, they could perhaps potentially fuck you over. When you hear stories about people that, reconverted to Christianity after they came into witchcraft, and they say, well, I was following this person, I thought they were a certain way, but they ended up being something different, they manifested differently, they did horrible things to me, my life suffered because of it. And I was like, maybe it's because they weren't talking to who they were talking to. You know what I'm saying? And they don't think about altars, and I'm like, look, your workstation, it's I forgot what I called it. I called it it was something very creative, very, very lovely. What was it? It was, oh my God, I can't even, it was spell something, I think I said spell station, or some, I don't know. It was very lovely. If I remember, I'll put it in here, whatever. It's in a context, but I don't know. I was like, you know what? Look, I am a person that thrives off of things like communication and bones, okay? I have this insane desire to get to know every sort of witch out there. I'm not even doing it for money. It's just a fucking no. Because honestly, we're trying to... Here's the thing. There's a lot of solo practitioners, almost to the point of a detriment to the community. We can't all be solo. We can't. We have to sort of learn to branch out and to create a community. If we're going to survive the war that is coming, we need to make sure we have an army that is ready for battle. We can't have everybody staying in their homes and shooting spurs out of a fucking window. At some point, you have to go out there and meet these people in person, create strong communities. I'm talking about legions of witches that are meeting. Huge, like, Sabbath celebrations, things like that. You know, it's like we have to be able to strengthen ourselves. And the other problem is that when it comes to the sort of information that gets put out, because there's too much solar practitioner and there's too much solar research, people go into the eaves of these fucking strange fringe beliefs and shit and are spouting it off as if it's something real, if it's something tangible, if it's something correct. And so it causes a lot of division within a community because we can't even agree on certain things. How there's, you know, the whole love and light thing, the whole Starsy thing, the whole, you know, soulmate shit or whatever, the understandings behind it, the history that is lost from it, through it, about it. You know, the things about epithets and everything else, and what an altar is, what it's not, and spell station, how it's the same area, well, you know. And I give my 2 cents about the spells, the whole state, the whole, you know, altar space versus spell station or works, whatever. And I'm just like, you know what? A part of me is like, look, this whole witchcraft thing, and I do magic, but it's not even so much witchcraft. And I'm a bard. I've said it many times, but I can and will throw a spell out or two, use a spell, or join witches in a ritual for spells, and we do things like that. Okay, I'm sort of freelance, if you want to even say that. But what bothers me is that it's like, well, you know, are we serious about what we are doing? Are we serious about the craft? Or do we believe in what we are doing? Are we actually making the efforts that we need to actually strengthen our hold over this world and over the souls that dwell within it? Are we actually actualizing our will over the powers that be in order to affect the world in a way that is to our liking? That is what bothers me. And I'm like, there's way too much, there's way too many different opinions. Everyone says everything works. And I'm like, well, if you put a cotton ball soaked in water out in the sun, it's going to get dry, isn't it? Someone says no. I'm like, really? But then science has a way of sort of, you know, analyzing these things, proving how these things work, and they go through it, then becomes verified, you know. And then I'm tired, honestly. I'm very tired of it, you know. I'm like, look. Honestly, do what thou wilt. That is the whole thing. I'm wearing my chain, by the way. Hope you guys like it. I'm just, you know, it's like I said, transient. But anyways, I was like, what is this? Honestly, I was like, okay. And I'm not blaming. I'm not. Look, I'm not on Justin's ass. I'd prefer to be in something else. But I'm not on Justin's ass at all. I'm just like, okay, that's where the mindset is going. You know, but he's been doing it for years. And honestly, if it works, it's good. But that's the other thing that bothers me. Because I was like, well, you say something works for you. And if it does, awesome. If it doesn't work for me, I'm like, okay. But then, you know, I'm like, then how the fuck did any of us learn anything or get anything from any of these grimoires that were written hundreds of years ago? These are people that were either so high in their delusions that were like, look, we're going to write some things down. We did it this way and it works. And some of them did. You know, you have people like Cunningham. You have people like, I forget his name. You have people, you know, Dominguez. You have the Golden Dawn. You have everything else. You have Raymond Buckland, you know. Just forget this tangent. I was just, woo! I don't know. An altar is not a workstation. It is not. It is a place of reverence for one, because it's like that everywhere other place you fucking go. If you want to clip your nails, if you want to do your homework on the altar, you're welcome to do so. But the altar is supposed to be a sacred space that you created for a specific reason. Because then it sort of creates this energy of ceremony and of sacredness within that space, because it's reserved for the gods. It's a reservation spot. Okay, when you're at a lounge, the VIP section is kept nice for the VIPs. Only the VIPs are allowed to go there. Okay, there is a specific line. If you're a king, for example, oh God, or the ruler of a country, and you are traveling abroad and you're being invited to another place, where do you stay? At the nicest place possible. They give you the best food, the best drink, the best bed, because they're trying to impress you, because they're trying to garner favor, because they're trying to garner anything from you. They're showing you the utmost respect. That is what a fucking altar is for. That's what it is. It is a place of reverence, a place of sacrifice, a place of communion and communication. That is what it is for, okay? A spell station, which is what the workstation that they were talking about, and this is what I believe I made up, is where you can craft and you have all your energies and whatever, you can do whatever the fuck you want here for a desired effect. You can have a hybrid thing going, but there may be some issues, because if what you are working with, the energies that you're working with at a station, isn't to the deity's liking, or is going to fuck around with whatever things you're trying to do in communication with this entity of any kind, it can cause some, maybe some potential friction or some issues to happen. Okay? For example, I was like, you know what? Let me burn some incense I haven't burned before. I think it was cherry vanilla. Okay, let me burn it here for let's just see what happens. I burn a cherry vanilla and I get straddled and almost groped while I was sleeping. This happened to me. Something was grabbing me, trying to smother me in the fucking quilt, and was like jumping on me and straddling me and shit. I was like, first of all, I'm on my side. Turn me over at least. But no, that's what happened. So if you're perhaps trying to commune with a spirit that is of a certain kind and is described in text of favoring certain things for a specific reason, and you put something else there that's not to their liking, why would they even partake in it? That's like you're making dinner, but everything you're making, the person has an allergic reaction to it. They can't eat. Or everything that you're making is something that they absolutely despise. They're not going to want to eat it. So they want to sit at your table. That is how I see altars, There is no discussion. There's no argument. It's what it is. We have to stop being so free when it comes to things like craft or anything else. And it honestly bothered me a little bit, because I'm like, well, it's nothing sacred, but you can do that. If you're a wild man, if you're working with Dionysus or whatever, you can do shit like that, just, fuck on the altar. And people do that. But there's a specific ritualistic, working you are doing when you're doing that sort of thing. If perhaps what you are doing at the altar is a working for a ritualistic purpose, and it involves the energy or perhaps the influence of an entity, of a deity or something like that, there can be some sort of, you can do something with that. But like, let's say I'm going to make a love spell at my Hecate altar, something like that, or at my Lilith altar, whatever the fuck, or I'm going to make a spell about, a death spell about a god that isn't really about that shit. I'm like, how would you react, for example, if I was invited to a spot and I came here to sit down and you're having a conversation that is completely antithetical to what I believe and what I talk about? I'm going to be like, why the fuck am I here? Why did you invite me? You do all this shit in my presence and you expect me to just capitulate to you and to give you what you want? No! You're mad. You're absolutely mad. Same thing with the epithets. Make sure that they know who you're calling and that you know for a fact who you're calling, because there's spirits that try to fuck around in the other realm, and then you will find out. These are my discrepancies when it comes to whatever they were talking about. Just those two things mostly. But, I was like, okay, I was like, there has to be some sort of order. You can't just work in chaos all the time, because no one's life can function that way. Chaos is the opposite of like order. You need some order in your life. You can have fun and everything else, and chaos has its place. But to just have everyone do their own thing, and then we wonder why spells aren't working, or we wonder why things aren't happening the way they're supposed to, or wondering why whatever. I'm like, these things can in fact all be connected, But, doing nothing about it honestly upsets me a little bit. I want to do just the lighting here. Hold on, because there's so much, I don't know what's going on here. It's a beautiful day outside. That's a little better. It's a beautiful day outside, The sun is out. It is shining. The trees are green for now. If we don't get hit by a solar ray or anything else with this fucking heat, but I'm glad it's not at least too bad because I am wearing red layers today, you know. But like I said, that is my tirade. It's not real, you know. But like I said, do what you want, but keep in mind that, you know. But look, they're not being serious. It's just opinions mostly, just, you know, occult behavior, and I still love it. Still keep what you're doing. You know, I doubt they'll see it, but if they do, I love them both. I did a review about Justin's video, and it's in my list here, and I thought it was brilliant because what Justin talked about is exactly what I felt about the whole Christian thing, about the whole MAGA thing, about the conservative thing, and about which I was like, yes, bitch, yes. I gave him so many flowers. You know, yeah, petals everywhere. You know. Like I said, you know, I don't hate anyone. It's hard for me to do that, you know. Unless you deserve it. Oh my god, I'm so disgusting. Anyway, Grimmy, what was I going to talk about? I got sidetracked. Ah! Brilliant. Yes, so, Grimmy reminded me about the discussion I was going to have. It wasn't necessarily with a book, but I feel like I need to touch something. I'm joking. Oh my god, I'm so bad. Bad, baby. No. Whatever. Oh. Here we go. Name him. I haven't had a name for him yet. It was a gift from a friend of mine from a different country. Oh my god, look at him. He still smells like him. Oh my god, I miss him. Anyways. So, today's discussion. Our video is going to be about things like synchronicity. No. Is it synchronicity? Synchronizing, syncretism. Fuck. What the hell was it? It was assimilation. Something like that. I don't know. Something along those lines. Cultural appropriation, all that shit. So, I was having a discussion with a witch friend of mine about the things that I see happening within my own culture, about how things and about the things that I've analyzed through time. And so, for example, how you have different names for the gods and things like that. And this is going to be somewhat opinionated, but something else I believe is stated in fact a bit. Like I said, I'm trying to, you know, speak out of my ass, you know, as I often do. And it is about, for example, how you would have different names for different deities, things like epithets or whatever. But then how it could be different from different countries and shit like that. And I remember a while ago, I mentioned something about it, I think when Ivy had us submit our questions in, and absolutely did that. And she played it, and I was simply surprised. I was like, oh my god, I'm on YouTube! And she was talking about it, and I pretty much talked about how there's this sort of strange cultural phenomenon happening when it comes to things like, when you have gods like Diana or Artemis, and how there's a lot of, you know, they sort of conflate the two, and they sort of assimilate with another, and there's gods that perhaps could be the same god in different regions of the world, but they have different names, and so with those different names are different epithets, because people can in fact do different things in different places, they can have different names, because there's a language barrier, and there's also things that they feel that, you know, they should call you, and that's what they call you. So a one god in different cultures can have a bunch of different names. So there's things like pantheism, which in fact couldn't, you know, be an actual thing. While there's, you know, different names for a goddess like Diana, Artemis, or any other sort of names or epithets, whatever you want to call it. But then I thought about, for example, when it came to how cultures assimilate into one another, and how the beliefs also assimilate. And how, for example, you'd have in history where all the Diana statues were then replaced by things like Mary or whatever. And how the child that she's holding, which I think is Aradia, I could be wrong, is then replaced with Jesus. You know, there's a lot of things that happen in our history, in our past. And I was like, and when cultures assimilate, they sort of just become one melded thing. But they ultimately end up turning into one specific culture within that group. And so I noticed this when it came to my people, Puerto Ricans. when they essentially came to America, they sort of were all about America and they love this country and everything else. They voted for Trump and everything else. Blah, blah, blah. Idiotic, stupid shit. Meanwhile, the U.S. is absolutely abusing the island of its resources, of its people, and its taxes. It's really bad. You have to do your research on it. It's really bad. For example, when it comes to things like imports, the island of Puerto Rico has to import things at 3 times the cost, versus other countries or islands only do it at perhaps 1 time than, like, I guess, like the normal price. Um, American citizens that move from here to Puerto Rico are given tax exemptions. Meanwhile, the natives there do not. The natives there also do not have the right to vote. Their votes don't really count during the elections. And they also have no say into who gets put in power on the island itself. So if you have a corrupted politician, the people essentially have no real say. There's a group called La Junta, and then there's, I think, the PPD and something else. And these are all things that are installed by the U.S. government. If you go back several years ago, and there's a pretext to this, the people on the island are trying to find a way to survive for independence. And there's some people that are saying they won't survive, but they've never really been given the chance to try. And because as long as we've been attached to the U.S., a commonwealth, as we are a colony still, we don't really have the same amount of rights or even the same protections. And even now, we are only citizens on a statutory basis in the U.S. So they don't really consider us, like full citizens to a certain degree. And now it's even talked about if we should even be citizens anymore, And the thing is that for as long as we've been here, we've been suffering, and the island is on a decline. Poverty is huge. The wealth gap is almost non-existent because all the people that can afford to live there have to either live in squalor or they have to move to the U.S. to try to find a better life. There's almost no funding on the island at all. Hospitals that already were understaffed are now being closed, and the island, which had, I think, a population of, a few million, has decreased substantially. And when Hurricane Maria happened, around 3,000 of the population died. People don't even know this. And, FEMA was sent here. This was during Trump's presidency. And they were only really allowed to stay for about 2 weeks because Trump said, you know what, we've been here long enough. And you guys have got enough money. We're pretty much out. You guys have to sort your shit out. Meanwhile, you have states here, and there's not even a count to the number, where FEMA stays for perhaps several months, if not years, to help with recuperation efforts and restabilizing the location. And they were giving hundreds of millions of dollars. Puerto Rico was only given about $6 million for an entire population on an island. This doesn't account for, all the damages that those disgusting winds from Hurricane Maria did. It destroyed wind turbines. It brushed, pollution, everything else. It made roads that we weren't even able to travel for a long time. People lost their lives. Power was out. And they also have to pay, I think, double the price for energy and power on the island versus people in the fucking U.S. And they make almost half, if not a fraction, of what the people make here. There are houses there that are now being taken over by the elites, and they are being sold for several $100,000. And Puerto Ricans sure as hell can't even afford that. The minority that can are a super minority on the island. And the last person they had in charge of the island was pretty much driven out by the people there. They had enough of their shit. They were protesting. There were fires or whatever it was. And that's what it took for the U.S. to take notice because they put them there. And so any person that we have is someone that is sent by the U.S. to govern us because they don't trust us with our own thing. And when it comes to things like vying for independence, and I'm sort of getting to the whole thing with Diana and Artemis later, what they did, I believe, in the 50s or the 60s, I believe, is when, for example, there was a person coming up on the island that was tired of how Puerto Rico was suffering under U.S. rule and everything like that. And they were vying for the independence. I forget their name. And so they were sort of labeled as a nationalist party or socialist party, but they believe in the freedom of the people and the ability to govern themselves and to look after their own people. And any nation should be able to look after the people however they like. It's their people. And they were met with not only discrimination, but brute force. The U.S. bombed the island during that decade, okay? And they also opened fire on civilians that were protesting, that were trying to fight for their independence. This happened first, okay? And there was even a point where they even made flying the Puerto Rican flag illegal. So you weren't even allowed to do that, okay? And the Constitution was around, and this was, I think, in the 40s, 50s, or 60s. It was around that time period. It was around World War II. all right? And then the only reason why they made us these sort of, privileged citizens is so that they could recruit us into World War II, so we could die for their nation or whatever. And there's a lot of history about it. And why and how this ties back into the whole thing with Diana Artemis is because over time, our people have assimilated into the US and have essentially drank the Kool-Aid, and they believe that they are these full-blooded citizens, and they talk as if they are whatever, not expendable. And the island is just a distant memory. Yet they have the audacity to say that they are proud Puerto Ricans and they try to represent everything, but they give no credence or love or pride to the island itself. They're only proud in name only. They know nothing of their ancestors or of their heritage. They care not to know about it. And the religion that was adopted has done nothing but, enslave the people to the U.S. and to the governing party, which is the church. And so we've lost our identity, we've lost our culture because of that. There are a few tribes that are still around. There's a Taino tribe in the Virgin Islands, and there's some in still Puerto Rico trying to keep the traditions alive and everything else. And what has happened, unfortunately, as a consequence, is that the people have sort of abandoned who they were, and now they're like, I'm American, but what does that mean? What have they done for your island? What have they done for your people? What have you done for your people? And the issue is that when this happens, the preceding generations start to forget the past, and the U.S. isn't even teaching about the history that did in Puerto Rico either. They've never taught that in schools, because they're never going to air their dirty laundry. So there's a lot of Ricans that don't even know that, okay? That aren't aware of the nuclear testing that they did off the coast that poisoned and put radiation into the fucking waters, okay? They don't talk about how the industry that the U.S. put into the island essentially closed down all the local businesses that were there and contributed to the, pollution that is on the island itself. It provided jobs, but they even pay them less than what they pay them here. So, learn your shit. But what happens when a culture assimilates into another one is that at some point, the dominating culture that governed them or took over ends up becoming the president. Because they're saying, you can assimilate, but you have to do everything and live how we do. We don't like you living your own shit. It's us, it's our thing. And it's happened over time. How before, when we had ancestors that would, do the things for their gods or whatever, now it's just one god. There's not even an assimilation there. There's not. There's nothing like that. And now they don't even know, or they regard their ancestors as demons or anything else. And they sort of lose that respect for the culture or anything else because they move away from it, they don't like it, but they adopt something else that has an even more terrifying and evil history. But it's what they believe in. But these on the island, they hardly even get any support, from mainland churches. They don't really. But over time, when a belief system or a way of life, a lifestyle is replaced for assimilation, what happens is that the people that had to assimilate had to abandon certain customs and lifestyles they had in order to have a peaceful coexistence with the ones that are native here. It wasn't like, you guys can still do your thing, but, share with us and stuff, and then we can grow together. It wasn't like that. It was, whatever you guys thought, it's fine, but that's not how we do shit. So if you want to live here, and they had no choice, by the way, because the U.S. took over the fucking island from Spain after Spain ceded it to the United States. This happened in the Paris, I think it was the Paris Treaty. It's not like Puerto Rico had a choice. Puerto Rico was under the boot of Spain for over 400 years, and then the U.S. came in. It's like we didn't really have the choice at the time. So, over time, a culture becomes assimilated, and what they once believed ends up being forgotten and lost to history. And so the essence and the identity of that culture starts to disappear, and then they sort of reinvent themselves and develop a new identity that is far from where they came from and far from who they used to be. And that fucks with the ancestors, because it's like, well, you guys just sort of abandoned us in our shit. Now there's no real correlation here. And so then you start to figure out, well, who are my ancestors? Who am I? Who are we? What's our power? What's our strength? What's our magic? What's anything about it? We don't look anything like you. And then the children start to question, well, how come they look like this, but we look like something else? Oh, we used to come from something else, but we were savages. What's the understanding here? We were savages, but the U.S. were the ones that sterilized 40% or more of the women population in Puerto Rico during the 40s or the 60s. but we're savages. They fucking castrated us. And we're supposed to be fine with just living here with almost no support going to our mainland at all. We're just supposed to be fine with that shit. So, over time, a culture becomes assimilated, and then, that's how cultures die. That's how belief systems die. So when it comes to things like their gods or the spirits, they sort of become a distant memory, and they sort of, end up drifting away. I don't know if they die or whatever, but you can't say they assimilate because it's so far from it. That's not really what happens in our case. But when you have, for example, when it comes to things like Artemis, when you have things like Diana, when you have the Romans or the Greeks that came together, whoever was the preceding one in this thing and gains more power influences that culture, and out of either persecution or fear of peace, they then capitulate and they then integrate themselves into that culture. But in order for them to coexist, they have to do what the locals do. They have to believe which is understandable. But there's no then respect to what they believe, and over time, their beliefs start dying out, and their culture starts dying out, and then they start, just becoming this one thing that was dominating thing. So this culture keeps persisting, but the other one that assimilated dies off. That's what happens. It's not like how both cultures come together and both grow together. That's not what's happening. That's not what happens usually when cultures and things like assimilate over time. They get lost and they die. And I think that's a theory I have when it comes to things like gods or spirits. To say that one sort of got integrated to that, there's the people that call out the names Artemis, that know things about Diana. But when you start conflating them with other goddesses that happen to share certain traits, I think that's where the sort of issue with the confusion comes in. And I think that can be sort of a disrespect to those goddesses or gods when you do something like that. Because, for example, if I'm on a team of people and we all can pretty much do the same thing, but only one person is getting the credit despite all of us doing the same kind of work, that's a fucking slap to the face. And for people to say that and to do that without thinking about how the gods or how the spirits would feel kind of disgusts me, and it makes me very agitated. So that's my issue with things like assimilation. When something assimilates, when a culture assimilates, but there's no equal distribution of either side and growth isn't encouraged from the culture that assimilated, that culture withers and dies. And then the culture that then invaded that area ends up taking over. Hello, colonization. That's what happens. When you introduce a plant or something, or a species that's not native to a land, into it, and they start taking over, the original species dies, okay? That's what happens. The excuse that people use that for immigration is not what's happening. Because the immigrants that are coming here are not taking over, clearly not. What is happening is that they're trying to simply coexist but still be themselves, but they're being repressed because that is not what the dominating culture wants. They're like, well, we're fine with having more people provided you look, sound, act, smell, and eat like us. So you have to be like us or you can't be a part of the party. There's no real, that's not really a peaceful coexistence. That's not really how that works. But I think that's the real thing behind assimilation. Assimilation, when something gets assimilated, it ceases to exist. So when things become sort of synthesized into one being, the roots of one or both could disintegrate and disappear forever. And the importance of the origins of those entities or those belief systems also dies out. And then now you're raising a generation of people that know not who they are, where they came from, or what power they possess. Because the history has been taken, and with that, the identity has also been taken. So, that's where my headspace has been at. So that's my issue with things like assimilation, cultural appropriation, things like why things like, names or epithets are important, everything else, the history, the culture, the blood, the lines, all that shit. All of it matters. To me, anyway. I don't know if it's the bard in me. I don't know if it's the storyteller, the poet, the singer, the musician in me. But to see these great civilizations, these stories, these souls disappear and never be remembered feels a bit sad to me. And it aggravates me. But that is my take on assimilation. So I like to distinguish the gods, if they are distinguishable at this point, because it shows respect to one god that perhaps was there or that perhaps is there still, versus another one that just takes all the credit. You know, as good as the lead singer is, they can't do much without the musicians. They can't do much without the production team. They can't do much without the microphone. They can't do much without the instruments. They can't do much without the crew. Everyone matters, okay? Every person that was in there matters. But when you sort of disavow one, or you don't pay attention to one, or you don't acknowledge one, it not only breeds resentment, it can breed sadness, it can breed rage or anger, and these others can have other ramifications as well. So, you know, keep that in mind. But anyway, I've rambled long enough. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks so much for listening. It has been a really warm day. I have something coming up in a little bit. I'm really excited about to get myself ready for it. But I urge all of you to sort of, keep in mind to rewind, be kind, to reassess and practice in excess greatness. I'm so happy for you all to be here today. Remember to practice in safety. Remember to practice, in your joy. Go out, experience the world, and remember to make the mundane magical, and that I love you all dearly. Until next time, lovelies.